you recently heard the term MCP server? MCP, Model Context Protocol. It's in all the news. Well, it's in the news that I read because I'm a giant nerd. So it's the latest way to get information from data sources into an LLM. And do you need to know about this? If you are an individual user of AIs, it could actually come in useful. If you are a business user of AIs, it will be a very big deal if it isn't already. So let's get into it. Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Korolov. I'm a technology journalist. I've been a technology journalist for over 20 years. I covered the dot-com boom. I covered, China's emergence as an economic I've covered a lot of stuff. And most recently, I've been covering enterprise AI, how companies actually use artificial intelligence, generative AI, what works and what doesn't. So, MCP servers, you have a data source. You have a folder full of documents. You have a database of stuff. You have product manuals, whatever data source you have. And you have an AI over here, maybe like an agentic system or LM, whatever it is that you're using to answer questions. Say it's used to answer questions about your products. I need to buy a mug that's at least 3 inches high. What mugs do you have like that, right? So an MCP server is something that you put in front of your data source that translates English language requests into the language that computers speak. SQL queries, search terms, API calls, whatever the databases speak, right? AIs don't speak API very well. They speak English. That's what they were designed to do. They're large language models. Um, and when they do write API calls, they're not very good at it. They're not very consistent at it. And so like an MCP server would be specially configured to have access to these databases. It's also, you might want to have authentication systems in there, which what people are allowed to access this information, who isn't allowed to access it. And it might also want to make sure that the queries are clean and not weird, that there's nothing creepy about it, it's not some kind of attack. You might want to have some kind of security built in. So the AI would say, oh, she wants to know about cups. So, hey, MCP server, for the product manual, tell me about all the cups that are bigger than this size that are, available today. AI literally asks that question in plain English. And the MCP server translates that into a SQL query or whatever search functionality that it has, figures out what database to send the query to, because you might have different databases on a bed, fetches the information, and then gives that information to the AI. That's an MCP server. It allows the AIs to grab information that they need from wherever that information is. Super, super powerful tool. So MCP, the standard was invented about a year ago by Anthropic. It was picked up by OpenAI and by everybody else, and it became an industry standard. And this past summer, pretty much every vendor has rolled out MCP support. And there are now MCP servers sitting in front of a ton of public stuff that's out there on the internet. So instead of telling your AI, go to this website, try to find this information for me, you can tell the AI, go to this MCP server and get the exact information that I need. So, very interesting. This is a way to kind of connect AIs with data sources in a very flexible way. Um, APIs break frequently, they're hard to use, they're hard to program, and MCP servers are like front end to them. So, very, very interesting, very, very risky because this is new technology. It's way too easy to expose stuff you don't want to expose to people who shouldn't have access to it. So you have to be really careful with it. The safest use case right now for an MPC server is if there's a public data source that's not particularly critical, weather data for your zip code, and it's a trusted source, like it's a reputable organization that's running this MCP server, not some guy out of North Korea. So vet your MCP servers, and you have an AI that goes and fetches this information when you need weather data. Great use of MCP servers, very easy to do, and uh, obviously useful, very low risk. Another low risk use of an MCP server is if you have a database that's not mission critical, like product information or support information, stuff that's already available on your website. So you don't have to worry about like access privileges and stuff like that. So you have a database, you put the MCP server in front of it, and then you give your AIs access to it so they can get product information or support information out of your databases very easily. That's a low risk use case internally. And you can also expose your product catalog externally. You can have an externally facing MCP server so that people from the outside can come in and grab your product information or your support information in a way that's easier than, like, say, finding it on a website. Because you don't want AI chatbots trying to crawl your website, slowing down your website when they can give a request directly to your MCP server and get the answer right back instead of spending like hours crawling all over your website trying to find the stuff and slowing everything down. So yeah, that's your MCP server. Now you can sound smart in business meetings. It is a very, very important thing right now, but it's brand new. There's a good chance it'll be superseded by something else next year because this stuff is moving so incredibly fast. All right. So I'm going to be doing more of these as I think of them. So if you like my take on how I explain this stuff, you can subscribe to the channel. See you guys next time. Bye bye. If I can figure out how to stop the recording. There's the button. There you are.